Our guest today has done a lot in hockey, from writing about the game to broadcasting about the game to being an e-bug with the Colorado Avalanche all the way through their cup run. And he's also created one of the greatest communities I think I've ever seen online in the Goalie Guild, both socially but also the website, which we talk about today. Justin Goldman joins us today, and this guy has dedicated his life to the game, specifically goaltending. But don't worry, remember, as always with Our Kids Play Goalie, if you're not a goalie parent, a goalie mom, a goalie dad, or a goalie to begin with, you're still going to get a ton of value out of this episode, because we dive into everything today, from the mentality you need to have to be playing the sport to how to leave your kids alone and kind of be isolated so they can learn on their own. Really, really important episode today that we've enjoyed. And as always, it's that time. We got to let you know that if you're a fan of this show, you get a nice discount on hockeywraparound.com using the code OKPH. For those of you who don't know what Hockey Wraparound is, if you have young kids and you're spending a lot of money on their sticks, this is a blade protector that you put on the bottom. It is the #1 in the market by far. It fits all sticks, all curves, all sizes, doesn't matter. It can cut down to size any blade, and it saves you money because it keeps your kids from going outside and scraping that fiberglass stick or whatever they have across the sidewalk, across the concrete. It protects that blade so they can play outside with their game stick and enjoy it, all while saving you money. So again, OKPH at hockeywraparound.com, and they'll take care of you, giving a discount. Or if you're inclined, you can go to Amazon. They have them on there as well. But without further ado, let's get to the episode with Justin Goldman on Our Kids Play Goalie. Hello, hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome to another episode of Our Kids Play Goalie. I'm Lee Elias with Mike Benelli, and our guest today, Justin Goldman, has dedicated his life to hockey and goaltending and has a resume to back it up. And when I say that, I'm not kidding. Let me give you just the highlights. He started working in professional hockey in 2003 with the Colorado Eagles as a junior scout and reporter before graduating from Colorado State, CSU, with a degree in technical journalism. From there, he worked in several media roles with the Colorado Avalanche, that's an NHL team, on the airwaves and in publication. In 2011, he joined NHL.com as one of their first goalie-specific writers before being hired by USA Hockey in 2012 as a regional goalie scout for the National Team Development Program. In 2016, he was selected as the e-bug for the Colorado Avalanche, a role he held through their Stanley Cup winning season in 2022. In 2020, he was selected for the Goalie Advisory Board for Sense Arena VR, which is a groundbreaking technology that I can almost guarantee many of you with younger kids that you will see them use this, whether they're a goalie or not, before they graduate high school. As I said, there's a lot more experiences I could list, but perhaps the most important and impactful is this next one. In 2009, Justin created the Goalie Guild, which today is a nonprofit foundation dedicated to supporting the global goaltending community. The Guild offers a wide range of education, resources, and financial aid. This also includes scholarships, books, research, and their Lift the Mass program, which is something we're going to dive into today. They also provide the goalie community with services like consulting, mentoring, and their annual retreats. It is a groundbreaking community that also focuses on the mental fitness of goaltenders, which is proven in print, as Justin has authored many books, including the one I have here with me in my hand, The Power Within, Discovering the Path to Elite Goaltending. There's a part 2 out there as well that I'm looking forward to reading. Justin, I'm not going to lie to you. This is the longest intro I think I've ever written, but I had to do it. It was worth it. Welcome to Our Kids Play Goalie.
Thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate the awesome intro. And it's just, it's been a ride, my friend. It's been a ride, and I still got a lot in the gas tank. So just excited, always looking forward to the future and whatever comes next. But thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure to have you. It's funny, just when I put these intros together, sometimes they're short. It depends on who we're talking about. But as I read through all of your stuff, your bios, and, again, we do research on this stuff. There's just so much great stuff to mention. I love hockey lifers. I consider myself to be one. Mike would too. And it takes the same level of passion to get involved in the game in the ways that you have that it takes to make the NHL, I think. And I think that, when you look at the numbers of people that work in journalism and nonprofits and media, I think it's similar to, quote unquote, making it as the NHL, but anyone can do it. But before we dive into all that, and we are going to dive into all that, one thing I got to ask you, every goalie's got a story about how they got between the pipes. Were you voluntold to play goalie, or did you naturally flock into that position?
I naturally flocked in the position, and it's funny because my background in goaltending and hockey is very non-traditional. I grew up on a horse ranch, basically in the middle of nowhere, like 45 minutes north of Dallas, Texas. So
Wow.
hockey was legitimately not a thing in my life, right? I didn't know the sport existed until I was 10, 11 years old. And besides watching hockey a few times on ESPN, I didn't get introduced to the sport full time until the Minnesota North Stars relocated to Dallas in 1993. So I was 11 years old at the time. And I just remember me and like my best friend in grade school at the time, we were just so pumped that there was like a new sports team and a new sport to really dig into. And we went to one of the very first team practices for the Stars, and they were just trying to build a fan base. So it was open to the public. And there, plastered against the glass at Dr. Pepper's Star Center in Valley Ranch. And sure enough, first two players on the ice are goalies. And those first two goalies were Darcy Wakaluk and Andy Moog.
Oh, wow.
And Darcy Wakaluk at the time was wearing this like the sickest all black and green gear setup, right? And he didn't take two strides on the ice. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh my God, I'm hooked. Like this looks amazing. Like, with a lot of kids, you have a big imagination. I was always obsessed with like medieval knights and medieval history and medieval lore. And when I saw Wakaluk hit the ice, I was just like, that's a knight in armor. Like that connection between goalies and medieval knights and like being a warrior. I fell in love with it at that moment. And that's the only thing I wanted to do. And basically the only thing I have done ever since.
Justin, I consider myself to be a geek who likes sports, kind of like you just admitted to. And I'll tell you, there was a game. This is a throwback, Mike. I don't even know if you remember this. NHL 98. It's by EA Sports, had one of the greatest openings in the history of video games and sports. And I will never forget, one of the phrases was, "Are you afraid of the masked man?" Right. And they had Felix Potvin on there just staring at you. And I was never a goalie, but I remember that was the coolest thing I thought I had ever seen in my life. Right.
Yeah.
For another episode in the future, we'll also talk about how, you were born in the South, and hey, guess what? You're hockey obsessed, just proving that regionally, it does not matter where you're from. You can fall in love with this game, which is an argument we have sometimes with people from the Northern Quarter. But again, another episode. That's not where we're going today. I want to dive right into the Goalie Guild because it is an amazing platform. Why don't we start from just how you developed it? Because it wasn't what it is today, back when you created it, and just talk about quickly the evolution of it, because it's really grown.
Yeah, I think the Goalie Guild was born out of my own experiences growing up, again, in a non-traditional hockey market. So I was all self-taught. I didn't have a goalie coach in grade school. I didn't have someone holding my hand the entire time, learning how to skate or learning how to get comfortable on my edges or wearing the gear or anything like that. And my parents were amazingly supportive, but they were passive supportive, right? They didn't play hockey. So I was really the first in our family to kind of take on this journey of wanting to be a goalie. So growing up, it was always very obvious to me that there was like a shortage of resources and goalie coaches, especially again in the South. And so I think just growing up and getting older and continuing to build this passion for goaltending, it was like, wow, there's so many other kids like me that would love to play this position, but don't necessarily have the support from the family or the associations or people around them. So how can I help alleviate some of these obstacles, some of these challenges that I know goalies are facing because I'm experiencing it firsthand. So I think ever since I was really young, like I can even remember in high school, just wanting to go out and help the junior stars goalies that were a little bit younger than me, and wanting to try and find a goalie coach in the DFW area, which was like finding a needle in the haystack. So for me, I think it was just mostly born out of my own personal experiences that like, this is an amazing position. The game has given me so much. How can I give back? How can I help other goalies overcome a lot of the challenges and obstacles that I faced? And that's really where the genesis point of the Goalie Guild came from.
What's amazing too, Justin, is when you go to this, I've followed you on Instagram for a long time. But when I actually went to the website, it's a different experience. Like, most of the time when you go to a website, you're expecting to scroll, here's all the information, here's how you can do this. Yours is not like that. I mean, you get there and it's like, hey, here's resources immediately. Like, where do you want to go? Right? What do you want to select on? So I applaud you for that, because it's almost immediate value. It doesn't look like a landing page where it's like, click here to sign up now, and you too can be part of the Goalie Guild. Like, it's not what it is, right? There's a clear drive to, like, how can we help you today, right? I really love that aspect of it. Is that something that you knew you wanted to do immediately? Did you want to be different, or did it just evolve that way?
It's so funny because I actually spent this past summer redeveloping the entire Goalie Guild online experience, and it was exactly what you said. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love fast action, high paced goalie websites and a lot of action and a lot of cool imagery and stuff, but that's not what the Goalie Guild is about. The Goalie Guild is a foundation that provides resources and education for coaches and families. So it's like, yeah, I want to get right to the point. And I want to try and make it as clear and as simple as possible for people to understand all the different layers and all the different programs that are involved. So when I discovered Gitbook, which is the platform that I use, I thought it was perfect. I know it's mostly for like coding websites and fintech stuff.
Yeah,
but I just thought, I was like, you know what, this is very transparent. And there is a lot of information in terms of like trying to explain, like, here's how the scholarships work. Here's, all the different coaching resources that we provide. Here's the actual research that I'm doing. A lot of goalie coaches like to keep that information close to their chest. Sharing is something that we need to break down that barrier here in North America. And so I'm very transparent about the stuff that I'm studying and the resources that I tap into. And it's a lot. There's a lot of different complex layers to understanding skill acquisition and goalie development. And I've accrued a lot of knowledge over the years. And so I just want to make sure that what I'm sharing is as transparent and as simple as possible to get to. So I really appreciate you saying that, because I worked my butt off all summer on rebuilding the experience and making it a little bit clear and more transparent in terms of like the work that I'm doing on a daily basis and how it all connects together under this umbrella of just giving back to the goalie community.
Well, look, the reason I bring it up is that this is not true of just hockey. This is actually almost everything, but it's just kind of, oh, this is the way we've always done it, is the general mentality for things. And that's the most dangerous way you can think about anything. So whether, again, you're born in Texas, so you've already always had to think outside the box. But I think what you've done is create somewhat of a model of other organizations, or for other organizations, excuse me, they can look at and say, wow, this is a different way of doing this. Because I'm like you, man. I'm a bit of a nerd. By the way, the guild part of the name makes a lot more sense now. But
yes,
the idea is that, Mike and I are constantly studying the game and finding stuff. And it's like, social media is there, but like, we would just want to give. Like, one of the reasons we made the podcast is we want to create communities and places for people to share this type of information. And I think you've done that digitally in a way that's not looking like just a sales pitch. And I really appreciated that when I saw it. So that's really cool.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that feedback, because it is one of the things, like, I'm not selling a product, right? Like, I'm sharing knowledge and information and trying to make it easier for non-goalie families and non-goalie individuals to still want to learn more about the position in a very like non-obtrusive way. So I really appreciate that. And I'm also very non-linear. Like, my background is very non-linear. My development path has been very nonlinear. And so I'm not afraid to try things that maybe haven't been tried before and not care if people don't like it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I stay in my lane and I stay in my zone. And if I feel like something's going to contribute to the growth of the foundation, or just make it easier for goalies and people to get involved, like, that's really at the heart of the decisions that I make with all this stuff.
Yeah, I think like for me, I mean, your platform is a great resource for a non-goalie person, which I am a goalie person, but for somebody who's not studying.
Are you though, Mike? Are you though?
Well, yeah, I am. I mean, I think I
I'm teasing
my goaltending, and I think it's because I think it is, it's such a weird position to try to manage in saying, okay, you need to be the best player on the ice, but you also have to be the mentally toughest, and you also have to be the person that doesn't show any emotion, but you have to show emotion, and we have to count on you, but, and you can't you just stop a puck, come on, so it's like, it's all those different things. And what I like about it is that your platform is able to allow me they kind of talk about the current events of goaltending, like because goaltenders are geeking out, right? I mean, like it's almost when you get like I don't know, two chemists in a room together and they start talking about things, you're like, I don't know what these two guys are talking about. They seem to be having a happy time and talking about this. Like my goaltenders, I want them to talk about like, oh, what's the latest stick you just got, or what kind of pads did you just buy, or what kind of strapping do you like better, this or this, or all those kind of really cool things. And for me, having a knowledge base there that I can refer to, it allows me to communicate with my goaltenders in a way where it's not just about, hey, you got to get ready for the game. All right, well, and guess what I saw? I saw this goaltender do this. That was really cool, that you might want to look at doing, because I see you're struggling here. I see you're struggling there. And sometimes the goalies, because I think the kids I work with, these are all 18 and under kids. They're so adept at being online and finding all that information out. But just like anything else we talk about on our show, sometimes it's way too much information and they need help fine tuning that. And making sure that they're getting, not only trusted knowledge base, but also something where they feel confident that it doesn't have to be one way or the other. Like, it doesn't have to be like, this is who you need to be.
Right.
And you can't evolve. And I think, from your point of view, working all these different goaltenders, they're constantly evolving their game, at every level.
So Justin, before you dive into that, Mike, you accidentally alluded to in a great way a question that I was going to ask. I think Justin plays into this. In your book, again, I got it here, The Power Within. For those of you who can't see the episode, this great cover, by the way. You got a yin yang sign on there, which I've studied a lot. But it's a goalie sitting kind of in a Buddha or Zen place. But Justin, this is something that stuck out to me. All right, there's a chapter in here, chapter 17. It's called The Truth. Okay, it's a very short but powerful chapter that discusses how there's so many voices, Mike, that you just said, that surround our kids in the game. But at the end of the day, it's the athlete's own internal dialogue that is really the most important. And I believe that coaches and parents play a major role in developing that voice and then having to know when to let go so that the player can kind of do it on their own. Do you agree with that? And if so, how can we all get better at that?
Yeah, I'm shaking my head like, yes, I agree big time. Autonomous supportive coaching is what this is known as. And I think it's one of the most important components to coaching right now in any youth sport at really any level. And, again, this is something I experienced firsthand. When I was growing up, I had to find my own way. I had to solve my own problems. And we know that every athlete is a unique individual, cognitively, emotionally, physically. And when a goaltender or a young athlete can actually learn how to solve their own problems in their own natural environment, whether it's at school or it's at home or it's on the ice, they develop that inner confidence and that sense of agency, which allows them to go out and do amazing things without needing to lean on someone else for constant support. Right. So one of the things that I've learned, especially in goaltending, I've learned this from a lot of the greats. For example, Mitch Korn, he always made sure to tell me that you don't want your goalies to lean on you as a crutch. You need to know when to step away and, like you said, let go and allow for the goalie to evolve naturally in their own environment. And so what's great is that now there's a whole science around this, right? Autonomous supportive coaching is not only psychological, but it's also just looking at their natural environment and their surroundings and the things that are impacting their decision making and how they problem solve on a daily basis. So yes, I'm very passionate about agency in goaltenders and allowing them to make some of their own decisions on how they develop and what drills they want to do and what things they want to work on, because that empowers them to know that they can find those answers, that they don't have to always seek externally where they're going to figure out why they're getting scored on glove side or why they're giving up bad rebounds. And it's a lot of trial and error. And so through that trial and error, falling down 50 times and getting up 51 times, you learn that resilience. That resilience actually naturally evolves within yourself. And that's so empowering, because when someone tells you you can't do something, you're like, you know what? I actually know I can do this, because I've failed a million times and I know how to struggle. I know what it's like to lose hockey games. I know what it's like to give up bad goals. So that's really only something that can actually happen if your coaches are able to take a step back and be like, you know what? I see there's an issue here and I know we can solve it, but it's okay if I just let the goalie try to figure it out, him or herself. And then when the time comes and they really need that, someone to step in and say, hey, you know what, you can actually try doing this. Again, I think that's a very empowering experience for the goaltender. You're showing that they have the capability of figuring it out, and they're going to respond to that because kids are extremely keen and they're very aware of situations like this. So I love studying autonomous supportive coaching, done some work with it in the past few years in Breckenridge. And I just think agency is a very, very powerful tool. Again, not only when coaching goalies, but any athlete at any age.
Yeah, I was going to say this goes well beyond goaltending, although I can see why it's so important for a goaltender. This goes beyond hockey. I mean, this is a life skill, right? Mm-hmm. When I work with teams, Justin, one of the things I talk about is what is the perfect team? And I always say it's an accountable team, right? Where there's a culture of accountability, because mistakes are inevitable in sport. The whole game is based off of capitalizing on other people's mistakes, right? So it's like, can you be accountable? Are we teaching our athletes, our kids, each other to learn, right? One of the hardest things about being a parent, and everyone listening is going to agree with me on this, is you have the knowledge. You want to give that knowledge to your kids. You want to give it all to them, everything you know. But the truth is this, they're going to fight you on that, right? And I'm realizing more and more, you have to teach them how to learn and how to do this on their own. A great example from that chapter that it was such a powerful point is the messages you give yourself, right? And I want to equate this to how we can teach them, giving action items to the audience here, right? You basically talked about it can be a negative response or a positive response, right? About how you look at something that's happened to you. Like, I'm going to do this better next time to get the next save. Not, oh, I screwed up and I let the puck in the net. A lot of this goes to how you talk to your kids at home. I heard a great example from another public speaker about, when they leave their plate out. It's don't leave your plate out. That's actually not what you should be saying. It's, hey, take your plate to the sink, the action, the outcome. Right now, that's not negative positive, but it's how you teach them to do that. When we teach our kids not the action, but the problem. You didn't take your plate to the sink. You left it out. Well, we all know how our kids respond to that, right? But if you give them the action of this is why it's important that you do this and you learn to do this, they're going to mimic that behavior. So when a puck does go in the net, or you turn it over, you put it in your own net, whatever it is, it hurts. I always tell the kids, you're going to feel bad. I'm not telling you should be jumping up and down when you fail. That's ridiculous. But you should go, okay, what's the lesson here? What is the sage perspective on this scenario? What am I being taught right now? The kid that learns to do that, screw that. The person, adult, it doesn't matter, that learns to think that way is going to advance at a level so much faster than the person that doesn't, that you will find success. Like you said, you might fail 100 times, right? So again, I'm talking a lot here. That chapter really stuck out to me. It's a real short chapter. It's only like a page and a half.
I appreciate that. And I think a lot of it is framing, right? So it's understanding that images are really powerful in the mind. And I think when, as a head coach or a non-goalie coach or even a parent, you just take a little bit of time to understand what it might feel like to be the last line of defense.
Great point.
That framing is naturally going to change to be more positive. And again, I think that's why empathy-based learning is such a big thing right now, and something that, I'm constantly trying to learn. And I know that's very important in a lot of coaching circles as well. Maybe you learned a little bit about that at the bronze level goalie clinic you were at.
Mike told me to go to that, by the way. I'm holding up here, joking aside.
Yeah, that's awesome. There we go.
Mike's the one who convinced me. I said, I'm looking. He says, like, yeah, you should go to that. I was like, all right, yeah. Mike says I should go. I'm going to go.
By the time this episode's over, Mike's going to be so full send on the goalie union. That's for sure. But I think framing is so important. One of the things I like to tell parents, you're talking about actionable, things that parents can take away from this. One of the biggest things I say to a lot of new goalie parents is, just because your kid does something wrong on the ice does not mean there's something wrong with him or her. And I think that's extremely important for not young parents, but parents of young goalies to understand, because naturally as a goalie, when you're 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, your brain is forming and you're dealing with all these new emotions that maybe you're not used to. when you give up a goal, you do feel bad about yourself. You know, you let people down, you let your teammates down, you let your coach down, you let people in the stands down. And if you look into the stands as a young goalie and you see your parents go, oh, like this, or having that negative response, or like, you know, having that negative energy, you know, you feel even worse, you know, and that's the last thing you want, is for a young goalie to feel like they did something wrong, or that there's something wrong with themselves. Now, naturally, this is going to occur in hockey games. The sport is competitive. We're all trying to get out there and win hockey games. But I think that's where the framing is so important, is understanding that just because you lose a game doesn't mean you're a loser, right? So goalies naturally internally process these things as if there is something wrong with themselves as an individual, because they don't quite understand that, like, they're going to go through this journey, that goaltending development is very, like I said, non-linear. And so for the parents, it's just important to try and constantly stay positive, and just remember that this is a very lengthy process, and it takes a lot of time for goalies to get comfortable moving in the gear and feeling comfortable on the ice and playing that position. You know, I think forwards and defensemen, they don't have to deal with that much, because, you know, they're wearing shin pad, you know, the gear is more molded to their body. Whereas with goaltenders, it's heavier, it's bulkier, it's not as comfortable, it's a little bit cumbersome. And that's going to affect the way that you perform and the way that you feel when you're just out there on the ice playing a hockey game. So I think framing is really important. I think that's kind of what you were speaking to really clearly and very well, about the role of the parent in all of this. And so I think that's really important. We talk about framing. And I just love that quote that I shared. You know, just because you make a mistake does not mean that there's something wrong with brilliant. You as an individual. So
yeah, and it's not just parents. This is a coach's job too. Like I have heard, Mike, I know you have too, and this always bothers me. I have heard coaches multiple times in a 1-0 loss or a 2-1 loss blame their goaltender and say something, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding. They can't score the goals as well. Mm-hmm. Right. And what a lack of accountability in that situation. Right. You know, and it's one of those things where, especially in youth hockey, the message you're giving your goalie between periods or after the game, especially if it's not your own kid. Right. I mean, you know, one of the things I think I try and say, and I hope other coaches do, is I'm not really worried about the score. I tell the goalie that. I just want to make sure you're doing everything you can. Because here's another one. This is one I'm learning with my own son. He doesn't know what he doesn't know, right? Mm-hmm. You know, in squirt, a lot of goals go in up top. And I told my boy the other day, well, yeah, you're not 6 feet tall, right? Mm-hmm. You know, when you shoot for the top bar in youth hockey, you're pretty close to the head, right? It's not the easiest save to make. So we talk about just what are the things you can do to help yourself in that situation. I'm not worried that it's going to go in. So it's what are we going to do? Another thing too is you mentioned this too, and I think that, again, this is for all hockey players. This isn't just goaltenders. Goaltenders deal with this way more than skaters, though. Is when a negative thing happens. This is for the parents listening. What is the reaction of the kid to you? Is it to look to you with fear? And am I being judged? Or is it I look to you for comfort? Or, and this one's fine too, I don't look at you at all because I'm not basing my success on what you think, which is also great. Mm-hmm. Right? But if your kid's looking up every time they make a mistake, wondering if you're going to yell at them, that's a dangerous place to be, especially if they're young. Right? Mm-hmm. It's not, in my opinion, Justin, that's not the relationship I think you want to have with your kids. And I don't think it's going to help them. I think it creates anxiety. It doesn't reduce it. And I think, especially if we're talking goaltenders, as we'll get into, there's a zen you have to have. You have to have a very goldfish memory in that position. Mm-hmm. You know, you can't go too long in that spot thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, again, we talk about framing for parents, and it's also important as part of that is don't be results driven when you're dealing with a young goaltender. Right. The result is the result. It's not a direct correlation to how that goaltender performed or what he or she may have learned in that experience, right, or in that game or in that tournament. And so, again, just letting go of the results or the score, like you said, is extremely important, because there's so many other takeaways beyond just what the numbers look like in a game. Right. And the goaltending position inherently means that you're going to be coping with so many uncontrollables. You can't control pucks bouncing off your own D-man. You can't control your coach deciding to pull you halfway through a game when you know you've still got a lot of fight in you. You can't control other coaching decisions. You can't control what other players, there's just so many.
Control the other team. You can't control your own team.
Right. So, and this is why like young goalies struggle a lot of times. This is why a lot of things, we see a lot of goalies, and it's not uncommon. This isn't meant to be negative, but goalies deal with a lot of anxiety and OCD. It's naturally developing within themselves because they're playing a sport as the last line of defense. I use that last line of defense a lot because I think it really frames like the struggle and the pressures that goalies face as the last line of defense. It sucks to play a game that you love when you have to react to what's happening out there 95% of the time. You don't have that agency all the time. You don't get to walk up to the plate and get ready to swing and hit a dinger, right? Like you have to wait for the game to come to you. And there's a lot of stress and anxiety that is inherent with that, especially when you're also feeling external pressure of like, I have to win this game. I can't give up bad goals. Otherwise, I'm not going to play the next game or I'm going to get benched. So there's so much happening within your own mind as a young goaltender that like anything you can do to help alleviate those results driven, overly competitive voices, whether it's external or internal, is really going to help. So again, it's like a lot of cliche comments, but it's just like, it's about the journey, not the right. Yeah. Like it's about the journey, not the destination. And all of these different things really do help a young goalie process the game a little bit better and just like calm themselves down and most importantly, just have fun with it. And not feel like they have to win every single game or always be the best player on the ice to feel like they're effective or they're part of a team.
Yeah, I'd love to add in too. I mean, knowing that, right, and thinking about how you frame that, because I do think like we talk to our youth players all the time about what you can control and what you can't control. If you have two defensemen and one defenseman's covering a play and the other defenseman has no idea where they're going and you're scored against, you can't just yell at two defensemen. I mean, you just have to say, well, you at the youth level, especially you're doing your job. Now, can we go look at what happened prior to the goal? Like where was your positioning? Did the puck get out of the zone? Did this lead to this? Like all that kind of stuff. But ultimately at the youth level, it's all about like, what are you doing as an individual? And are you getting better or are you getting worse? Are you improving or are you not learning? Like, so I think, knowing your background from a goaltending perspective and some of the technology you're involved in, like I know us in our school, we just put in a Sensorina room, for the goaltenders. Mm-hmm. And it really was more because it was a lack of ice and the ability to say, well, listen, you can't ask these kids to throw the pads on, throw the skates on. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about, knowing that goaltending is such a unique position and not necessarily you have to have a Sensorina program, but what can you do off the ice as an individual goaltender to kind of quiet yourself and be in positions where you can get better without a coach, without having to have full-time goalie coaching, without having to have a shooter with you. And also the things that you can do to work on your game, because specifically you're the goaltender needs to work on specific things in relation to you. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, not to get a whole, off-ice training program here, but, what can goaltenders do to strategize to say, listen, I'm on the ice twice a week with my team. Yes, sometimes I have a goalie coach, sometimes I don't, but I know where my deficiencies lie. And what can I do to improve those without getting on the ice?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. And this points to a couple of things. First of all, that sense of agency, right? We know that goaltending is, and I'll say this a million times, we know that goaltending is very nonlinear in terms of like that development path, but it's also very self-organized. And by self-organization, I mean, what I spoke about much earlier is like being able to solve your own problems. And Lee's reading the first episode of the trilogy of The Power Within, and Lee, as you get through the other two books and you get to the end, and you've probably heard from 35-40 NHL goalies that have all been on extremely different paths to getting to that top of that goaltending mountain, but there are correlations and things that you will find that are similar in all of them. And one of them, to Mike's point, is like every goalie that's achieved a level of greatness or have reached that high level, they all at some point in their junior career, some point where they were of age, it's different for everyone, doing some type of off-ice mind-body awareness practice, whether it's yoga or Pilates or breathing techniques or visualization. Something about the mind-body connection is so incredibly valuable for a goaltender to find that level of inner performance. You almost don't get to that high level of performance unless you're doing something like that on at least some type of regular basis. Now, it's not like they're doing it 7 days a week and that's it, but at some point in their journey, they picked up some type of mind-body awareness practice and they gravitated to it because they realized that it helped them feel better about all of these different aspects of their own development. Does that make sense? So
totally.
Mike, that's one of the first things. Like right now, breathing exercises and just having a basic understanding of why it's so important for a goalie is huge right now at all levels. And I think about when I was a goalie at a younger age, like I wasn't breathing half the game because I was so like just tense and so caught up in tracking the puck and making sure all the bajillion things of my positioning and my technique were dialed in, right? So half the time, like when you're killing a penalty and the pressure's on in a 3-3 game in overtime, it's like you're not breathing. You're holding your breath and you tense up, right? And so just having that basic understanding of the knowledge and the awareness of I'm not breathing is going to, you know, hopefully lead you down this journey of like, okay, how can I get better at this when I'm actually performing? So that's just one example. And like to your point about Sense Arena, why I love being involved with the Sense Arena program is because, again, it provides agency for the goaltender. They can put on the headset and they can go in and they can choose what drills they want to work on and what areas of the game they want to work on. And it's all through their own research and their own drive and their own passion for wanting to figure things out. And yeah, it's great. You can have a coach say like, okay, here, you're going to go in and do the X, Y, and Z. But like, I personally just love giving them a headset and being like, here's how you get into Sense Arena. You let me know what you like, find. Tell me what you experienced. Let me know what you thought was cool and what you thought wasn't so great, you know? And just listening to their experience, guiding themselves in their own development path, again, circles back to all the stuff I've been talking about self-organization and autonomy and agency. And like, that's where I think goalies truly learn. Like, we know learning happens everywhere and you need good coaches to provide some structure. But when I see goalies just go in and tinker in the headset themselves and come back to me and they're like, I want to take this drill that I did in Sense Arena that I found. I want to do this on the ice. Can we replicate this? It's like, all right, let's figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And that's I think very powerful for goalies and like you said, and players.
So we got to quickly make sure all the listeners understand what Sense Arena is. So it's a VR experience, right? So Oculus, some of you might have heard Oculus, but you put a headset on, layman's terms. I know some of you know out there, but I got to tell you, man, I tried this thing out about a year ago. And I remember I was skeptical. I'm like, all right, this is going to be, man, I was in the NHL for a minute. I mean, it was insane. You put this headset on and you're on the ice making saves. And I'm not even a goalie. And it was like, wow. In fact, Mike, it gave me hope as I get older and my body really won't let me do this anymore. I'm like, I'm still going to get to play somewhat because this technology is only going to evolve to the point where we can all use it. But I just want everybody to know out there what it is.
Right. And the cool thing about anything like that is a lot of the components that are in there are like, for a guy like me, like has, 25, 30 athletes. And I'm like, I got to get more reps for them somehow, unsupervised by me. It's a great tool. But all the things that are in there are things that guys like Justin have been doing without a VR. Like it's just this again, it's just another tool. But you can, to your point, Justin, as a goaltender and as a parent, you can find all of those resources in your living room. I mean, for free. Like, visualization doesn't need equipment, but the equipment definitely enhances and helps, I guess, in a place where sometimes our kids, don't get, like you saw every goal. Like, I don't think there's a goalie in the world that doesn't know how to juggle, right? Like every goalie, every goalie, like juggling.
I don't know how to juggle.
Right, well, you got to do better. Come on. Yeah. But I mean, every goalie, you see, they have a ball and they're juggling or they're throwing the ball off the wall. Like, that's basically, it's free, right? I mean, so you can do a lot of those kind of things, and whether you're doing it for hand-eye coordination, whether you're doing it to mentally prepare, whether you're doing it just for getting your body in motion and warm and flexible. Like, so it's all different variables to why you do it. My point was just, the goaltending position, and it took me a little while as a coach, especially at the college level, to understand, like, okay, I got to get these guys, like, they're going to leave the room and they want to do their own thing. Like, like I want a team. Well, and they are part of the team, but their preparation, and honestly, for me, like, I've allowed all the players to do that. Like, all the players now are learning how to prepare differently to help them. Yes, there is a time to be in the locker room together and everyone, being synergized of what we're doing. But there also is a time where certain players need to get themselves ready in certain different ways. And I think we as coaches have to respect that. And I think also, like you mentioned about, the breathing exercise and things like that. Like, there's a lot of old school coaches still that don't give a crap about your breathing, don't care that you're not ready, or like, listen, just get in the pipes. I'm not taking a timeout for you. You got to suck it up and be, and be prepared. How you do that, I don't care, and I don't want to know. And I think that's where we've all evolved, especially from a USA Hockey practice perspective and the bronze coaching clinics and things like that, that we're just giving so much more education to the everyday coach to know that, okay, this is another point of emphasis that we have to have for all of our athletes. It just happens to be that this one athlete is a very important cog to the wheel, because we only have two of them. And then we have to, cater around that player to get proper positive reps, so that when they do get to a game, we can just let them go and do their thing. So it's just because you're absolutely right. If I have a defenseman that has a bad first period, I could sit that defenseman for the next two periods. If I have a goalie that has a bad period, it's not so easy. I might
not have a choice. You might not have a choice.
Well, not only that, we've seen plenty of times where you pull a goalie, he's out, and then the hell with this kid sucks too. Throw the other guy back in. Then you're like, okay, like, he's terrible.
You said everybody knows how to juggle in hockey, right, Mike?
Yeah, you can't just have, you don't have six goalies on the bench, and you have to prepare for having players that have a different, there's a different piece of how that player needs to fundamentally prepare and recover and think about the game. And you as a coach need to understand that you may need to take a little extra time and have a different communication, vehicle or portal with your goalies, not so much like to cater to them, but to understand that last line of defense mentality and how that presses on them.
Yeah. There's a couple of, that's all very great points. And it's a lot of the conversation we're having right now is a conversation I love to have with non-goalie coaches, because we're all just trying to find alignment and how we understand what it means to be a goalie. And again, real quick, a point on Sense Arena. One of the things I absolutely love about it and how it's evolving is that it does generate empathy. When you put the headset on and you play the goaltending position in Sense Arena and you've never been a goalie before, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, it's actually not very easy to see pucks from the point.
That's so
oh my God,
true.
traffic. Oh my God, traffic does suck. Oh my God, just having a mask on your face with the bars. Right. Oh my God, things aren't as clear as I maybe thought watching from the bench. So like,
and you don't have to, and you can't get hurt.
That too. You don't get hurt. And that's the thing I think that's so important is, like, I challenge parents and I challenge coaches that have never been a goalie before to put on the Sense Arena headset and do a goalie drill, just to get a very simple idea of like, oh my God, this is not nearly as easy as I maybe thought it was.
I got a couple of dads and moms. I think I'll invite to ours.
It'll change your life. You'll never yell at a goalie the same way again. Trust me.
It's true, but that is the power of empathy-based learning. And that I think is what, for years I was trying to hammer away at with coaches was like, coaches that don't understand the position. I'm not saying this to separate them. I'm saying take the time to truly try and understand what it means to be a goalie. And VR is an amazing way to do that because you're immersed in it and you can't not experience what it's like to be a goalie when you're wearing the headset. And I think that can be so, so powerful because, again, already you're starting to empathize with like, oh my gosh, how do you even see like, oh my gosh, now when you give up a goal from the blue line, you're not like, oh my God, what the heck was that? That's terrible. You're actually thinking about, well, what got in the way of his vision? What did the puck actually, what are you seeing from the goaltender's perspective? that you don't see from the bench, or the stands are 200 feet in the press box, which is another conversation. But that, I think, is what ultimately my goal is in the goaltending community, or in the hockey community, is to like help coaches and parents and people that haven't experienced a position find that level of alignment with the understanding of what it means and what that experience is like, so that we can all treat goalies a little bit more like humans and a little bit less like targets.
Yeah, it's funny how to see how this technology is going to evolve, because like I can already hear some people like, it's VR, like, yeah, it's coming big time. It's already here, actually. It's just a matter of how it's going to expand. Justin, before we get into Lift the Mask, which is something we have to talk about, and we're kind of leaning towards that in our conversation anyway. One of the signs of a good writer, which you are, is you're able to really consolidate sentences to not be bloated and just say something very good. And in your book, you had a small quote that really stuck out to me, which we kind of talked about a little bit today too, which is inspiration is often found in isolation. And this talks about also mindfulness. We were talking about the ability to breathe, and a lot of people go, I don't know how to do that. It takes time. It takes as little as a minute or two to just kind of do it, to be focused, to be present with something. It's something we don't teach enough. But when you say inspiration is often found in isolation, it's obviously not limited to goaltending, like we're saying. It's a life skill. But how important is it? And this is the question I want you to tell our audience. How important is it to create that time for yourself and your kids, right? Because sometimes as parents, we need to learn how to lay off and let our kids be isolated. Again, we've been alluding to that the whole time. But I think, again, talking to the parents and the coaches, we have to give them the isolation. I've had to learn this lesson an infinite amount of times with my own kids, because I'm just very hands-on. I know the game. I want to get involved. And a lot of times I have to tell myself, you need to let them have a minute. Stop telling them what to do and let them figure it out.
Yeah, I think it's extremely powerful. And my experience again was that I had parents that truly supported everything that I did. And I was into a lot of different stuff. Like I said, I was like really into medieval knights, and I wanted to play the saxophone, and I want, all the things that kids want to do when they're growing up, when they're discovering themselves. There are ways you can support it without hammering down on them every single day and trying to structure what is naturally unstructured. And I think development for kids is a lot of there's a lot of research about how we're just wired to create. Like creativity is a natural instinct that we all have. And there's a lot of things that pull that creativity away and destroy that natural creativity by overstructuring it or having too much of an impact on a kid's day-to-day journey or day-to-day, different tasks that they have to get through. And creativity is really reinforced and developed and nurtured when kids are able to be in their own environment. So when they flock to something or they find something that they truly enjoy, whether it's running or it's riding a bike or it's doing some activity that's fully autonomous, right? Like they find the answers are out there in the distance, but you're not always going to see it right in front of you. And so you have to be able to process your daily life. You have to be able to process what you truly enjoyed and what you didn't like. And you're forming all of these different, what's the word I'm looking for? You're forming a lot of different behaviors just naturally by going through life. And so I think for young goalies and for parents, it's just, again, they're going to find those solutions if you just let them figure it out themselves.
Right.
And in isolation, you're able to process a lot of the stresses that you go through. And for me, I think this was naturally easy for me because I grew up in the middle of nowhere, right? Like I didn't have a lot of structure to my day-to-day.
You grew up in isolation.
Yeah, I grew up in isolation. Like I was outside all the time and I was in nature, and I was really in tune with my feelings because of that, because there weren't a lot of voices. It was just nature and it was just my natural surroundings. And it's harder and harder for kids to find that because we're in such a more technically dominant world, right? And so again, just when you see that your kid is maybe in his room and he or she is going through something, it's okay to let them be in that environment for a little bit. And then naturally, I think as a parent, you have that instinct for like, okay, now I feel like it's time to maybe say something.
That's a good
but
point.
if, to your point, Lee, if you just allow for some of that to naturally occur, you're not damaging anything. You're not being a parent just because you're not around the entire time. So I caveat, I'm not a parent. So again, I'm saying a lot.
No, there's a lot of truth in that, man. There's a lot of truth in what you just said.
What the hell do you know that? But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's all. But as parents, we have to remember that. Like it's great to go like, oh yeah, that is what kids like to do. Like, you know, I think that's what a lot of us parents, we forget how much freedom we had, how much unstructured time we had, and how like I remember, like I don't remember my father ever watching my hockey practice ever. And now, that's like great. Parents are filming the whole practice, like the whole practice is getting filmed. I'm like, what the hell are you doing with all that film?
Mike, I gotta tell you real quick,
the iCloud companies must be making a fortune off these hockey parents. And
Mike, but between that and Live Barn, I gotta tell you, a really funny thing happened the other day. Keep in mind that my kids started playing during COVID, and like, you know, you kind of had to be there. And I was at my son's squirt practice weeks ago, and I realized there was no other parents there. And I realized, because he's old enough, I was like, I don't have to be here. And I got really excited. I was like, I just got an hour and a half back to my life. And not that I don't love watching him, but I think it's also important that he plays without me there sometimes. He knows I'm not there, whether we have a good relationship or not. But Justin, listen, whether you're a parent or not, the point you just made, this is what I will tell you that you probably don't know, okay? The point you made is absolutely true. You are not a bad parent if you just let them be, all right? A lot of us forget that. What I'll add to it is this. It's really hard to just let them be, especially like I said earlier, you want to give them the knowledge, you want to share things with them, at least I hope you do, but like most things, you have to let them do it on their own. You talk about empathy and empathetic learning. All of us adults have to try once in a while to be like, what was it like when I was 9? What was it like when I was 15? Remember your own life at that time, not from the viewpoint of an adult. And look, you're naturally going to say, oh, wow, my mom or my dad was right about that. View it as a 15-year-old. You're going to see things totally different. I try and do that with both my kids of, okay, what was I thinking, if I can remember, at that age? Or more importantly, what was I not thinking at that age, right? Wasn't worried about these things. I just wanted to have fun. So I think that's an important part of it as well. But what you said is that inspiration happens in isolation for everyone listening. This is why, just to prove the point, most of our great ideas in the world come when we're taking a shower, or we're at the gym, or you're out for a walk, or you're driving, because you're typically by yourself in those situations, and your mind is quiet for a change, or it might be very loud, depending on how you want to look at that, right? But that's when you're able to be present, right? And you're able to think. And this is something we can teach our children to do, right? There's a big misconception that you can't teach kids this because kids naturally wander. Your mind is wired to wander, right? Wonder and wander. It works. But you can teach someone, hey, let's be present for 30 seconds. Let's focus on our breathing for 30 seconds. That's a learned skill that you can gain. Right. And to your point, Justin, we do a lot of this with my kids. I think there's a lot of moments that make me proud as a parent, but when I see my son or daughter breathing on the bench or in the net, and I know like they're doing it on their own, it's like, wow, that actually worked. And they're relying on it to stay calm and not get anxiety, which they definitely have. Anyway, I'm talking a lot.
That's all right.
I want to get Justin, share your thoughts, but we have to dive into this lift the mask thing because it's massive.
Well, it's funny because it just reminds me of something I saw online last week about this viral video on TikTok about a girl who's like absolutely amazed because she went on a walk down in her neighborhood without her phone for 10 minutes. And she was like, oh my God, it changed my life. Like, I feel I have such a clear mind. And us old people are like, okay, really?
First 20 years of my life.
It's so similar. So similar because I'm in a car right now with a new driver, and you know, when my son's driving and he's like, man, I never realized how beautiful this area is, or wow, that's really nice. I go, yeah, because your head is in your phone when I'm driving. Like, so I think when all of a sudden he's now behind the wheel driving, like, wow, I never even noticed that there, or wow, I didn't know that was so close to us, or
That's
wow, that's
funny.
there. But it's actually uplifting. I'm like, well, number one, you're looking around the road. That's a
Yeah,
good
thank
that's a
sign.
God
good
for your
sign.
sake, Mike. Thank God. Yeah.
But I mean, it's
Yeah.
just funny to see that, you're like there's a that Coach Chippy, the kid that does the online thing.
Yeah,
He
he's
has this great joke about the junior guys going into a walk in the woods, and he's like, and the guy's like, yeah, well, let's just put our phones down by the tree and we'll go for a walk. And he's like, yeah, we're gonna put our phones down. For he goes, no, I'm not doing that. Like I can't do it. But it's just funny how like it's so foreign to these kids not to have this device stuck into their hand, which gets me. That's the juggling act of technology, right? Of
We're all
using
guilty of it.
video and using, but even for the players, right? There's like the whole the controversy or the discussion about having iPads on the bench and not like, do you need that instant look? Is it helping? Is it hurting? Like all those kind of things is us juggling this new world of, wow, we have all this great access to all this stuff, but is all this stuff way too much to use and
John
access?
Tortorella of the Flyers says it's distracting, and he's taken them off his bench.
Well, he's an expert, but I think it's but again, this is the juggling act, right? Because there's plenty of people that will say this is the greatest thing you could ever have as an athlete, like and I'll tell you right now, hitters know it. Hitters have known this forever, right? Like the hitting book has become a video book, which has become a huge teaching tool that they're looking at prior to getting in the box to hit. Like their whole game has changed based off of the information they're able to digest. So, but are we doing that as imagine, there's going to be a time, right? There's going to be an iPad attached to the back of the net, and on a goalie can turn around and look at the goal. It's going to happen.
We already have the GoPros.
Oh, they're all even the pro guys. Look at how many guys gets a goal score, and they look up at the jumbotron. And they're watching the whole thing in real time. And all of a sudden, we're bringing that down to our 8-year-olds and expecting them to process it the same way. And like, to me, it's so mind-boggling. But
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of books out there that prove in a million different ways that nature is healing. And I think anytime you can get away from the daily grind or away from the technology, it does so much good for you. And it does help you find those answers from within, which goes back to the autonomy and the agency. And that was huge for me as a young kid growing up. Like, I was very blessed to be surrounded by nature all the time and just, again, have parents that really cared about me, but they cared more about just me enjoying the process than it was like, oh, you need to get to the next level because we spent this much money on gear. I never had that. And that was something that I'm so grateful for now. It's probably a big reason why I'm still so passionate about the position, because they didn't take it out of me. They didn't teach it out of me or coach it out of me. That's another thing that I've learned from a lot of great goalie coaches is why you just observe more and talk less, because you don't want to coach good skills out of a goalie. And some of those skills are going to be skills that you can't see. It's not going to be the hand quickness or the ability to recover back to your edges. It's going to be how they process the game and how they overcome a lot of the challenges. And you don't want to coach those things out of a young goalie. So you have to just sit back and let things happen. And that's really challenging, like you guys said.
It is. Something you've done, a little transition here, to help people with those challenges. And Justin, I don't want to sugarcoat this. This is actually a really important thing you've created. As I've fallen into the goalie world more and more, this is something I hear about every month from the other goalie parents and sometimes the goalie themselves. And it's a brilliant initiative that you've made. I actually like to see this go beyond goaltending. But let's talk about Lift the Mask, which is a mental health support program for goaltenders that you operate through the Goalie Guild. It's also a monthly challenge that you share with your audience. Let's just dive into why you created it. Maybe some of the important stories you've received from the initiative, and they may be good or bad, or positive or negative, right? Because it's really important in hockey that we're putting the mental health and mental fitness of our kids on an equal playing field as the physical side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lift the Mask was essentially born out of the same situation with the Goalie Guild. It's a lack of resources for the goaltending community. And this was back in 2017, 2018. So it was really at the beginning of my biggest challenge as an athlete, which was like trying to be an emergency backup goalie as a guy that never played pro hockey before. So this, while it was a dream come true, it was also extremely stressful. And I dealt with a lot of anxiety because of it. And so for me, it was looking again at the hockey community as a whole, or sports as a whole, and like, wow, there's actually no mental health support programs for goalies. Well, if there's a gap in that, in anything in the goaltending community, I'm going to be there to help fill that gap. And that was a big one for me. Is I think back then in the mid 2010s, 2015, 2016, mental health really came to the forefront. We started to see athletes actually open up about this affecting their ability to just live happily and live with fulfillment. And I feel like goalies, for whatever reason, were at the forefront of this in pro sports, whether it was Robin Lehner or it was Scott Darling, who has a really incredible story of, going from being this top flight college athlete with the University of Maine to being a top draft pick with the Coyotes organization to literally living on the street in Vegas, making $100 a week, spending it all on alcohol. He went from the top all the way to the bottom, where he was just clinging to life by a thread, to being a Stanley Cup champion with the Chicago Blackhawks. Right. And that is a mind-blowing journey, not just for goalies, but for any athlete or any human being to go through. And so for me, it was, okay, I'm not a mental health practitioner. I'm not a licensed therapist. But I do have a good skill set of connecting people. And so Lift the Mask, really what it's all about is, yes, we provide some funding so that there is no financial barrier for a goalie or a goalie family to go get professional help. But I just want to connect goalies and goalie families with professionals, because when a goalie is struggling, he or she may not want to talk about it. And he or she may not know where to turn to find someone that will listen and resonate with them and help them. And so this program is literally just acting as a bridge between the individual and the professional that can give the licensed guidance or help the goaltender start that path to, improving their mental health and improving their lives. And that's really all it's about. It's a very simple mission. And there's a lot of different ways that we try to advocate and promote this. And you mentioned one, like the monthly photo contest.
Dive into that real quick, because I think that's brilliant. Yeah,
the photo contest is great. And so, like, Lift the Mask, the name behind it is very very simple to understand. It's like goalies wear a mask to protect themselves, but that mask also hides their emotions. It hides who they truly are. It hides their personality. And while it's important to wear a mask because it protects you from the puck and from getting hurt, it can also be detrimental because no one really sees who you actually are. You don't get to express your emotions. And again, this is something I experienced my whole life growing up, is that, I became conditioned because of the nature of the position to bottle everything up and not really show my true self to a lot of people. I was just naturally conditioned to be this very even-keeled, stoic, like almost like bland person on the surface. And we know that's not reality, right? Like, you have to be able to express yourself. And at least we get to do that with paints on the mask and stuff like that in our gear. But anyways, this idea of, like, being able to lift your mask and share your story and help resonate with other goalies and with other individuals that haven't been through certain things is really, really powerful, because it normalizes mental health. It normalizes the struggle and the challenges that we're all on and we're all going through. And what's funny about this, journey for myself is, like, I built Lift the Mask, but I had never really, me personally, I had never really gone through any type of traumatic experience, or I was never diagnosed with OCD or depression or anything else. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago, when my mom passed away, that I actually faced it head on. And that was the most difficult stretch of my life. I was shattered into a million pieces because my mom, she passed away very unexpectedly. And I was just struggling to survive for a while. And because I had built this program where, goalies can connect and share their stories and not be afraid to open up, it really helped me go through the same process. Like, I was able to talk to my friends about what I was feeling. I was able to connect with some of my mentors, like the guy that I wrote the book with, Mike Valley. Like, he was the first guy to reach out to me and be like, hey man, I don't know what you're going through, but I'm here for you. And so just being able to normalize being there for someone, I think is already a huge step in the goalie community, because it's so easy to, you know, especially as a coach, look at your goalies and be like, I don't want to mess with them. I just kind of want to leave them alone. I don't want to mess with their juju or what they're doing to prepare. So I'm just not going to do anything. And sometimes that's even worse. You should be able to go up to your goalie and have a conversation with them and just be like, hey man, how are you feeling? Yeah. You know, or like, hey, what can I do to help you get through whatever you're going through? I know the last game was a tough loss. I know it may not be easy right now, but like, I'm here for you, man, or I'm here for you. You know, and so just again, being able to normalize conversations that maybe aren't like super comfortable,
right,
can be so empowering for a goalie that is probably conditioned to just bottle it all up. And so
yeah,
that's really, you know, a little bit more about the backstory as to why it has become like the most important part of the Goalie Guild Foundation.
You know, Justin, to echo you and to share some perspective with everybody listening, right? You know, all three of us up here today have lost a parent. And what's amazing is until it happens, I mean, it's trauma, like whether you're expecting it or not. And I'm not judging any situation. There's trauma involved with it. Right. And as adults, we're somewhat equipped to handle that. Right. Some of us do it better than others, but it's extremely hard. And I remember when my mom passed, I got incredible perspective from my brother, actually, with our children, all of our children. And he made this great point. He said, the younger kids don't understand this feeling is going to go away, or it's going to settle, right? It doesn't ever go away. Mm-hmm. And when you equate that to hockey, it's like, you know, does a 9-year-old know when the puck goes in the net, or a 7-year-old, that feeling will not last forever, right? So again, I'm using an extremely powerful example here in terms of losing a parent. But even as adults, to take that trauma and understand it, analyze it, it's hard. And yeah, you know, I think our first inclination as people right now is just to hide it and push it down. It's probably the last thing you should do, right? Mm-hmm. You really should speak with someone. And again, just bringing this back to lift the mask, because it's getting a little deep. What's funny to me, and Mike, I wanted you to comment on this too. If we told youth athletes and parents, hey, we're going to make a connection with you and a professional athlete to work on your snapshot or your skating, and there's scholarships, and everyone would jump at that. Like, oh yeah, I want that. But we say, hey, we're going to make a connection with you and a professional for your mental fitness. People go, you know, maybe we'll get to that. It boggles my mind. That's still part of the stigma. And again, you said it perfectly, Justin. The stigma is breaking. Like, we are more open about this now than ever before. I think everyone really does realize, I mean, that mental health, mental fitness is essential. But I think that the conversation kind of stops there and like, well, I don't know what to do about it. You've created something to do about it, and it's right there. And I would love to see more resources for people of, hey, we're going to connect you with a professional, and that not be a bad thing. Right? That's the part of the stigma that needs to break. You are doing that with Lift the Mask. You are breaking that stigma. You are providing, you're having conversations about it. It is so darn important that things like this exist. So I just want to tell you how much I appreciate it, number one, and applaud you on doing it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's just having like normalizing it by having conversations. Like, right. Again, it doesn't always even have to be a licensed therapist or a sports psychologist. Like, you gain so much clarity, and you learn how to manage these challenges when you realize other people have been through it as well. And right. It's amazing when you experience something that really challenges you, or may, you know, result in some trauma. You realize, like, there will be people that will come to you naturally and say, you know what, I dealt with this as well. And so many of my goalie friends reached out and said, man, I never told you this before, but I lost a parent when I was 14, or I went through this, or I went through that. And like, you just realize you're not alone. And right. When you realize you're not alone, especially again for a goalie who is the last line of defense, you're in the blue paint all by yourself. You don't get reinforcement from your coach when you skate to the bench after every shift, like, you know, skaters do. That feeling of normalcy and that feeling of belonging because someone else experienced something that you experienced in their own way is so important. You feel connected, you feel grounded, you feel like there is a solution and there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that saves lives and that changes lives. And
100%.
more important, and this is a phrase you'll get to in the books that I use a lot, is every drop counts. Is like that adds up over time. And what ends up happening, and you see this with a lot of goalies, like you see a lot of goalies in the broadcast booth, right? Like Darren Pang and Brian Boucher. Like, when you get to that point in your life, you realize like you want to give back those same lessons to the next generation. And I think that's why the goalie community is such a tight-knit group, is because it's such a unique, challenging position. When you come of age, you just want to turn around and make sure that the next generation has support. And that's what it was for me. Even though I didn't play, professionally or whatever, it was just like, I've been through so much on this journey of being a goalie. It's so unique. It's so challenging. It's so beautiful. I just want to make sure that the next generation has, some level of support.
Well, you're not defined by your elite prospects profile. And that's,
I don't even have one, which is great.
Yeah,
I actually asked them if they would make one for me, because I was an e-bug for 5 years, and they're like, we can't find you anywhere. It's not happening. But yeah,
they're going to find you on this show. We'll make that happen for you.
I appreciate that. But that honestly, I think is what it is. It's like, it's normalizing the experience of being a goalie and normalizing the challenges and normalizing that, obsessive compulsive disorders or anxiety or pregame jitters or all of these struggles that we inherently have as being a goalie, because that's just the nature of the position, is very normal and everyone's experiencing it. And you can still lead a very fulfilling and happy life, even if you struggle with these things, because there are ways to work on it. There's ways to manage it. And that's where the professionals come in. And hey, if you just want to talk to an ambassador or someone like myself that's not licensed, great. I'm always here to have a conversation and just try to resonate, try to find that, like I said earlier, that alignment between our different experiences. If you feel like this is something that's really detrimental to your daily life and you can't have normal thoughts, or you can't feel normal when you're performing, okay, maybe it's something a little bit more serious. Maybe this is something that you should talk to a professional about. Hey, you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. Look at Connor Ingram. Look at all these other goalies that have come out with their stories about how they went and saw a professional, and they entered the NHL abuse program or whatever the case may be. And look, they're back on the ice and they're playing great, and they're continuing that nonlinear journey of development. And those are the stories that are so powerful. Like what Robin Leonard did coming out about his situation for those years was so empowering. Connor Ingram, I mentioned, his story is unbelievable, what he went through. And maybe the most recent one is Spencer Knight. This was a first round draft pick, like highly touted answer to all of Florida's problems. And look at what he had to go through. He went into the substance abuse program. When he got out of it, he explained like the anxiety was why he leaned on the substance, whatever it was. Yeah. It was the pressure that he felt being the answer to all of Florida's problems. It was just too much to manage, and that's okay. It's going to happen. A human can only handle so much before they eventually break down and something happens. But you're never defined by your mistakes. You're defined by how you overcome your challenges. And I think even though everyone was like, oh, what's wrong with Spencer Knight? Like, why isn't he playing? He makes all this money, blah, 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 all that stuff that you hear. It's like, wow, now you really understand what he was going through because he opened up about it. And by opening up about it, think of all those other goalies that are hearing this and maybe struggling with some type of substance or struggling with, the OCD or the anxiety or whatever it is, depression. Wow, they actually can solve it. There are ways to get better, and it's a journey, but man, you come out of that so strong. And again, it's like now you can take that experience and give back to the community and help others. And that's that self-fulfilling cycle, I think, of care and nurturing and wanting to help others is super powerful. And I just try to build on that by sharing those stories.
I was lucky enough to be at the NHL Awards when Leonard won the Vezina. And you know what? I'll never forget what he said. He said, I may be mentally ill, but that doesn't mean I'm mentally weak. And
exactly.
That was a groundbreaking statement in mental health history, not just sports. But I remember he said that it was so powerful. I never forgot it. right? So with that said, I have to end this, unfortunately, on a fluff question because of some of the things that you said. But you were involved with the Lanch for many years. You're not officially now, you're retired, but you said you were really into medieval knights. So the Vegas Golden Knights, is that the coolest thing ever for you or not?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I'm actually a big Knights fan. I love watching the home games because they just put on this production.
Oh, it's amazing.
And the guy comes out, the knight comes out at center ice, like puts the sword on the ice or whatever. And
I actually know him. His name is Lee Orchard. He's from Peterborough in the United Kingdom, and he loves that job. I can tell you that right now.
I'm sure he's super. Yeah, that's so cool. And yeah, I think just naturally, that was just something I was really into as a kid. And I think if the Knights were around in the mid 90s,
that would have been your team.
That probably would have been my team. Plus, I love gold. Like gold's one of my favorite colors. So yeah, the Knights are a great franchise.
It's in your name, brother. I mean,
it is. Yeah, it's in my last name too. So yeah, that was I have a very I'm really passionate about archetypes.
Right.
And goaltending brings to the surface some really important archetypes as hockey players. Like we're really tough, we're warriors. And I just think seeing goalies in all of their gear, it's like I just can't make that. I can't not make that correlation. And there's a lot of nobility in that. Like, there's a famous quote about, goaltending is the most noble position in all of sports. And I truly believe that. And I truly believe that, I'm very fortunate that I have the opportunity to kind of live out that archetype and just try and uphold certain standards of what goaltenders should be. And one of them is just to truly, not only have the passion for the position, but giving back. And that's really like my purpose, I think, is I've always been really passionate about giving back because I've been so fortunate to play this game for a number of years and have some really crazy experiences. And because my path has been very nonlinear, like I really lean into that. So yeah, I think that archetype of like the goalie as the knight and the last line of defense is like really empowering and really helps goalies like embrace the challenges that come with it. And it also makes it easier to know that like there's going to be times when you're down on one knee and you've just been, slugging it out with another team and you're completely drained and it's hard. It's really hard, but building that inner resilience and all of these skills on the inside, I mean, that's where you truly find the answers and you truly find that purpose. And it's all contained within that blue paint, just being a goalie.
Well, Justin, I'm going to say that you are doing it. You will continue to do it. I think that you're right at the forefront of this from a goaltending perspective, but really a sports perspective with what you've done with mental health, mental fitness, and just creating a community where people can learn. I think that it sets a really tremendous example for all of us. And again, it's not limited to just the internet, right? The books you've written, the speaking that you do, it's fantastic. I think we're going to end it there, man. This was a great episode. Justin Goldman with us today. Thank you so much for giving us some time.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you guys for having me on. And I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing because, again, making this kind of information accessible is extremely important. And your podcast obviously does that to a T. So thank you guys very much.
Well, thank you, buddy. And again, make sure for those of you listening, share this episode with all of your goaltending friends, non-goaltending friends, people that need to hear it. Make sure you go pick up Justin's book, The Power Within. As he said, it's a trilogy of books. Very, very good reading, regardless of your age. And make sure you check out the Goalie Guild if you haven't already. And really, just to check it out. It's pretty amazing. But that's going to do it for this edition of Our Kids Play Goalie. For Mike Benelli, I'm Lee Elias. We'll see you next time, everybody. Skate on and have a great week. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you found value wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Also, make sure to check out our children's book, When Hockey Stops, at whenhockeystops.com. It's a book that helps children deal with adversity in the game and in life. We're very proud of it. But thanks so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode.